Hi, and welcome to My Nut Childminder, a podcast that's meant for, well, us childminders. My name's Charlotte, and I'm going to be your host and colleague throughout these episodes, and I hope that this podcast helps you feel more connected to the childminding community. As childminders, we're in quite a different position to most other early year settings, and that feeling isolated can be a big reason why people leave. So let's chat more about it and stick around to find out some tips about how you might feel less isolated and enjoy your role more. So let's chat a little bit about what it means to feel isolated. Because let's face it, we're not really on our own all the day. We do have small humans that are chatting to us all the day long. And we do have parents and carers coming in chatting to us about the day of their little humans. But sometimes for me, the feelings of isolation can be that of professional isolation, where I feel like I'm the only childminder around, that nobody else is in the same boat as me, and that I don't have another adult to speak to for any period of time throughout the day. So I feel like it's very different to working in a nursery or a larger setting where you might have other adults to work with, float ideas off of, check you're okay, have a lunch break with. All these things are very different for childminders. I suppose that nannies can quite often feel similar, but I feel like as a nanny you might be more out and about with other nannies. And although childminders can meet out and about, it does feel a bit different that you have to be registered and make sure that you're around safe people and have those kind of registrations in place to do so. Thinking about what the effects of isolation might be on a childminder, I suppose it's feelings of loneliness, which aren't ever really a positive thing. You might feel that you're alone, or you're worried that if there was a problem that you wouldn't have anyone there to help you. It might be that you feel a lack of inspiration. I just don't know what to do today. I can't look at these toys anymore, the same toys again and again and again. I don't know what to do with the craft. These kinds of feelings of lack of inspiration can be quite demoralising. I also think sometimes that childminders, even really experienced ones, we don't know the answer to everything, and a child might be showing us some kind of behaviour and we just don't know what to do, and having someone to bounce ideas off in a confidential way could be really, really helpful. There's also just the point of having an adult conversation in a day. I don't think many people realise that childminders are extremely focused on the children in general, that we do have the curriculum, that we are registered, that we often don't get a lunch break, that we don't have anyone else to talk to in a day, that our partner isn't here, they might be off at work if you have one. You might be living on your own and have nobody to talk to in the day, and then no one who comes home at night. It can be really stressful. So I feel like it's a really big, important side of childminding that maybe people don't consider when they first start. I don't think it's completely negative. For me, I used to work in group settings, and working on my own is a massive improvement for my own mental health. I like being in charge of myself. I like being able to plan everything with the children. I like not having anyone interfere with my plans or judge how I set things up. But sometimes I do miss that element of having a bit of a giggle in the day with a friend, or being able to have a conversation that doesn't revolve around Bluey or some other children's TV program or the toys in general. Some days you just don't want to sit and pretend to eat fake food all day with no one else to joke with. So I do think it's a really big, important part of childminding that people are prepared for. Because if you're prepared for it and you have things in place to help combat those feelings, I think that the role can be a really fun and exciting one. I also feel like different childminding settings will have different definitions of isolation, because you can have, like me, sole childminders who are on their own for over 40 hours a week with no one else to work with, and not really any other childminders locally that want to engage. But you could be a childminding setting that has assistants and works with co-childminders, so therefore you're in a slightly different position where you might feel more connected with your childminding community and less isolated in the day. So let's look at a few figures that tell us about these feelings of isolation. So I'll post some links underneath wherever you're finding this podcast. But gov.uk say that in 2013 there were 56,200 childminders. But in the year 2023 there were 27,900 childminders, which is a half of the amount of childminders that there were. And this could be for a variety of reasons. COVID happened and people have a different expectation of work-life balance. There are also different feelings around the registration process, funding, but I feel like a lot of it will be about how it feels to be a childminder and how quite often you do feel like you're on your own. And I think that to be able to be in a role where you're completely independent from other people, you have to have a level of confidence in yourself and your abilities and be able to keep yourself so self-motivated. So these are all skills that we can discuss and that we can have tips on going forwards. In Scotland, there was a review by the Director General Education and Justice, and they found that there was a diminishing number of childminders too. And from their kind of study, they found that 45% of people leaving childminding also linked this to feelings of isolation. So nearly half of the people that they talked to felt that they were isolated in their role. And I feel like that COVID gave a really big impact to this part of our role, because we were key workers and we were open for key worker children, and we were also in a lockdown, so we didn't get to go anywhere. And it was quite a scary time accepting children into our homes when there wasn't really any means testing and there wasn't any vaccines at that point. So I feel like people were very scared and very isolated at that time. And I think a lot of the support available for childminders is mostly around your Ofsted grading or equivalent if you're in a different area, of how to achieve, how to be better, how to provide the best. And I don't think there's as much support out there for those feelings of isolation and loneliness and just professional networking. So I feel like we should delve into that. The government here in England have launched something called a Childminder Mentor Programme, and this is supposed to be a way of childminders connecting and getting support, especially in their early days, but I believe it can be accessible to anyone who feels they need it, where they get access to a experienced and approved childminder on their programme, and you get 4 days of support split into hours across the term. And this is a mostly virtual kind of setup. You would have a Zoom or equivalent kind of chat and talk about all sorts of things that you might need for your childminding business. I haven't heard very much about it. I'm not on the Childminder Mentor program, and I don't know anyone on it. So if you have any feedback about that, please make sure you let me know on social media, because it's such early days, there isn't very much feedback about it yet. And it would be really useful to know if people feel more supported with this, or if it feels like it's only, again, focused on these Ofsted grades and improving practice rather than combating feelings of isolation and supporting a childminder's mental health. So let's think a little bit about how we could combat these feelings of isolation, because we are in a role where we have to think about other people all the time. We have to put the children first. We have to put their safety first and their learning first. But we also need to look after ourselves and make sure that we're functioning well in order to look after people. And I think that's super, super important. So sometimes it's okay to be selfish, and it's okay to think what you need. So the first obvious one is to go places with the children that are around other people. So going to things like toddler groups, the library, the play park, bumping into other people at the, it could be other childminders, it could be nannies, it could be parents. Great advertising, by the way. All these kinds of safe spaces where you can bump into other people naturally are a really good way of not feeling isolated. And actually, it's very similar to if you were on your own and you had a chance encounter with someone at a bus stop or a coffee shop, and you have that little interaction. It makes you feel less lonely and it brings your well-being up for the day. So these kind of chance interactions are really critical and easy to do. You could also engage with other childminders that you might already know. And if you're very lucky in your local area to have a support group or you're part of a childminding agency, you might be able to be put in touch with other childminders who might already have a network. If you're new, they might already know each other and welcome you. Usually childminders don't feel competitive against each other. Usually we are supportive of each other. We fill our spaces, and then we know the other childminders that have spaces and kind of, give each other the contacts for families looking for childcare. So it's a really good thing to have a network of other childminders. If you can't find them in your local environment, you can find these groups on social medias. I think be careful of social media. You need to find groups that are supportive and not always showing you what you feel like dream setups and completely picturesque and unachievable. These are not going to be groups that make you feel good unless you particularly like that. But finding groups that are relatively safe spaces to discuss things and feel supportive are going to be better. Having things like these podcasts to listen to, I found very helpful. I have listened to a lot of podcasts in the past about education in early years, but I really did feel like they didn't quite apply to childminders. The feel of the settings that are given as examples are very often group settings. The professionals that come from these settings have a very different experience to childminders. I feel like we offer very different type of relationship with families and children, being a home environment quite often. And not every childminder will work in the same way. There are childminders who are much larger settings and maybe more similar to a nursery. But in general, I found that although we follow the same curriculum and we offer similar things in some ways, we also encounter very different problems. And so I hope that this podcast will help you combat feelings of isolation, because your experience as a childminder will be validated and you won't feel so on your own. I also think it's very, very important that you have a life outside of childminding, which is really difficult when you work really long hours. And we're working with these tiny humans who take up so much of our brain space, and we just think about them all of the time. And when we go to a shop, we think, so and so would really love that. They would really love that too. And no, so and so wouldn't like that. You constantly have this narrative in your head of the children that you care for. At least I do anyway. And I think it's really important to have a life outside of childminding that includes something that recharges your social battery. Whether that's going to a fitness class, whether it's joining a reading group, whether it's going dancing, whether it's singing in a choir, whether it's doing a crafting activity with friends, whether it's going to the pub once a week. I think you just need to have something that recharges your social battery and that reminds you you're an individual with interests, you are interesting, you matter, you have relationships that you can rely on, even if they're not professional ones. This is so important, and if you don't have that, I really, really recommend that you find something outside of your house that you can enjoy with other people, because you need those chance encounters with people. You need relationships, because you matter just as much as the children you look after. And if you don't look after yourself, you're not going to be looking after them to the best of your ability. So the big takeaway from today is to make sure that you have something outside of childminding that matters to you and helps recharge your social battery. Another way of combating isolation is to attend training outside of your working hours. So you might find something that's online. I recently did a persona dolls training that was all online, and it was really interesting. And because it was online with cameras, I could see the other participants, and we all got turns to speak and share ideas. So that was quite a good way of not feeling so isolated in my professional role, that I feel like other people care about the children and that other people are interested in this type of resource, that not everybody I know is interested in it. So it was nice to find similar ground there. But also you could attend training in person, even if it's your statutory training, like your safeguarding. Sharing those experiences with other people is all part of how we connect with our wider community. You might also attend something like a conference, and they're a bit bigger, and lots of people might feel a little bit intimidated going to those, but they can be lots of fun. Quite often you get to do a little bit of shopping around, which, you know, again, those chance encounters where you bump into someone who's buying the same thing as you, or, you know, you're umming and ahhing over it and someone makes a comment and makes you giggle. Maybe you get a bit of rapport going with the seller, and they might tell you about something else you hadn't heard of before. Conferences often have kind of talks and workshops and things if that's what you're interested in. So I think that attending these can be really important. It's much trickier for me to attend those at the moment, and I haven't attended one for a while. I did attend a small local one online and in person recently when I was speaking at it, and honestly, the thing that the people mostly enjoyed, it was called the Early Years Forum, and the thing that the people most enjoyed, especially childminders, about these meetings was to meet with the other childminders and to have their experiences kind of validated and shared. They are there for the updates because they're important, but the main part that people are interested in, that I found, is that networking and just chatting to other people who have the same job as you, who just get it. Because goodness, don't we work a lot of hours? My goodness, isn't it frustrating sometimes? My goodness, isn't it just the best job in the world sometimes? But if you don't have anyone who gets it, you need someone who gets it, right? So attending conferences with other professionals who are like-minded and also have differences to you is going to be really important. If you really, really struggle with these feelings of isolation and other things kind of aren't really making it up, you're just really missing working with people all day, it might be worth thinking about and looking into if you can hire an assistant or working with another childminder in the same building. There are ways of doing this, and I think if you're really missing that element of being in the, you know, in a earlier setting, it's worth looking into. I know lots of childminders who really love this way of working. It's not for me. I do like working on my own, but I do like seeing other people. So I like that I get to pick and choose. But for some people, it's really not something that they're willing to kind of be on their own all day. And having an assistant or having another childminder to work with really, really boosts their practice and their mood and their well-being. Some people, although well aware this is not for everyone, some people end up working with their partner. So childminding is such a fun job, and although it has its challenges, it's fun, it's rewarding, it's creative. We get to be outside all the time and not stuck in a stuffy office. And sometimes our partners get to see that, and the people we live with. Maybe it's your mum, maybe it's your child that's a grown-up, maybe it's your partner. Whoever you live with might go, hang on a minute, that job looks far better than me sitting in my office all stuffy and hot and gross and never getting to go outside for 8 hours a day. I want to do that. So sometimes this is where your assistants come from. And I do know some childminders that have done this route, and if it's of interest to anybody, we might in future do a little interviewee podcast where we can get in touch with people in that situation and find out how strong your relationship has to be with that other person to be able to work and live with them. I think that's a really interesting dynamic, and I know quite a few childminders that have gone down this route, and you definitely need to be secure in your relationship with that other person to be able to handle that. There are lots of other ways of not feeling so isolated, and I genuinely think the main one is make sure you have a life outside of your work. You are a person that is full of interests, hobbies, other skills, relationships, And having a life outside of childminding, even if it's only one thing a week, is going to be really important for you, because we do work a lot. We work very hard. We focus entirely on other people. Many of childminders have their own children, so they're looking after other people's children all day, and then after this, they're looking after their own children, and then they're looking after their partner. And looking after yourself comes bottom of the list, and it's not really acceptable. So take this as a stern telling to make sure you have something for yourself, because you need it. And to be combating feelings of isolation in your work, you need to have that outside of work also to boost it up so it's not low all of the time. So that is my big main takeaway for today. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please do follow on all the social medias. I take ideas for future episodes of the podcast. So if there's any topics that you feel like you'd like to discuss or find out more about, then please let me know. So I think that's all we're going to talk about today with feelings of isolation. We've talked about what it means, how it happens, how it makes us feel and the impacts. We also talked about some facts and figures. We discussed some ways of combating those feelings. So I hope that you feel that your experience is validated, that it's a real part of childminding, that we do have these feelings of isolation, but there are ways to overcome it, and it doesn't have to be the whole definition of your job. We can discuss this further another time. We can carry on this discussion over social media. You can follow it on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter/X. And we have got so many topics that we can discuss that affect childminders so differently to every other setting. So I really hope you'll join me again soon. I hope you enjoyed the chat today. Make sure you go and find something to do around other people this week. Have a cup of tea or coffee or other beverage, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.